So you're building a new house and you want to go solar. What do you do next? Stick around and I'll tell you. So the first thing is, if you're building a new house and you want to go solar, there are some things you can do to make it easier and better for you. Also, you may find it tricky to get anybody to consult you about this because most solar salespeople are probably going to run screaming from a new construction deal. Not all, but most of them will. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but mostly they just don't know how to advise you or what to tell you, and they don't think they're going to get paid for a long time, so they don't think it's worth their effort. So what can you do to make solar better for your new construction, for your new house? Well, there's a couple of things that could be very helpful. The first one is, assuming that your electrical panel is going to be in the basement and you're going to have some type of attic or crawl space, then what will make the wiring for the solar a whole lot easier, better in every way, is to have a 1-inch ENT conduit running from the attic space to the basement space and have access for the solar wiring. So that will allow them to do an internal wire run from your roof all the way to your electrical panel in the basement, which is where they need to be, and they won't have to run any outside conduit. It will just make the whole job cleaner, neater, and better. You just have to allow free access in the attic and free access in the basement, and that's it. The nearer you can put it in the basement to the electrical panel, the better, but depending on what you're doing in that in that basement space, it may or may not matter. But just having it run internally from attic to basement will be very, very good for your solar installation. The second thing to consider is what kind of roof planes you're going to have and what direction they're facing. Now, I'm not telling you to redesign your house or reorient your house, but you may want to consider that in the original design, and certainly you might be able to make small tweaks that could make all the difference. So if you have a south-facing roof and you were planning on putting dormers on that roof, that's going to impact how much solar you can fit on that roof, which is the best plane to have your roof on. Likewise, if the roof line is going to have lots of angles and little tiny roofs, then that's also not going to be ideal for solar. Ideally for solar, again, don't change the aesthetics of your house to something you don't like, but ideally for solar, we want a nice big rectangular roof facing south with no obstructions on it. So another thing you can do is you can design any of the obstructions that are going on the roof and put them either near the ridge line or not on the south face. And that's easy to do when you're building the house. You can reroute those things. But if you put, your vent pipes and other roof obstructions right in the middle, scattered all over your south-facing roof, it's going to hugely impact the amount of solar panels you can fit and therefore hugely impact the benefits you can get from putting solar on your house. Now, I keep talking about south-facing roofs. You don't have to have a south-facing roof to go solar, depending on where you are and shade, et cetera, et cetera. We put solar on east-west roofs all the time, sometimes even north-facing roofs, depending on conditions and the pitch of that roof. Again, we're just looking for a nice big rectangle facing south-ish or east-west even, and hopefully it will have limited shade as well, but every site is different and tricky. Those are just some things you can think about as you're designing the roof or designing the home and getting into this that you can incorporate, which can make your solar journey a lot easier and better. But one of the reasons that solar sales guys aren't going to want to talk to you probably is because it's tricky to figure out what size system you want to spec for a new home because you don't have a usage history yet. However, there are other limiting factors potentially in your design that may make the decision for you. If you can give your solar salesperson a layout of the design of the house that includes the roof size, which most blueprints that I've gotten from architects do not include. So really, for the solar people, in order to make a preliminary design that has any use to you, we need to know the pitch of that roof, the actual size in feet of that roof, and then of course which way it's oriented, southeast or west, etc. And of course, if you know what trees might be there, that can be helpful in making a guesstimate as well. Because at this initial stage, that's really all we can do is make a guesstimate for what size system we can put up. But that can still be, very helpful. In some cases, you may have so much roof space that you could put up a ton more solar than you may need, in which case we're going to need to assess, what we think the house is going to use for electricity. Now, there's load calculators that you can get online, which are useful to a point. They take into account all of the different appliances you're going to use, et cetera, et cetera. But even with that stuff, it really has to do with how you're going to use the house. So the big ones to me are you going to have any big things that are going to really use a lot of electricity, and how many of those will you have? So are you going to have mini splits or an air source heat pump, heating and cooling, because that's a big user of electricity? Are you going to have an EV that you're going to plug into the home eventually? Are you going to have a hot tub? Are you going to have a pool? These are the big questions that I ask people, because my experience is that here in the Northeast, the average home that's not electric, doesn't have like a ton of mini splits or an EV or a hot tub or one of those things. The average home uses between 7,000 and 8,000 kilowatt hours annually. But once you start getting into a home that has mini splits and or one of the other things, again, depending on your usage, everyone is different and every home is different. But my experience is that those homes are going to use more like between 11 or 12,000 to 18,000 kilowatt hours a year or more. Another thing to consider is how many people are in the home and what your usage of the home is like. Do you work from home? Do you have teenagers at home all the time? You know, all these things. So do you like to have the house? Are you using electricity to heat and cool the home? And do you like to have the house really cool in the summer and really hot in the winter? So you can sort of build a picture of what you think it's going to be, and you have to sort of make your best guess. And then, you can get a preliminary sort of idea of what the roof is capable of, and if that may or may not meet your needs, or if you have more roof space than needed. And you can make some preliminary guesses about what the right size is. Now, as you go through the process of building the home and going solar, it's important, or not important, but it can really be helpful to have your ducks in a row. So solar takes several months to get installed and turned on. And having done this many times with new homeowners and actually doing it my own build on my own house, I think it's critical that you can do the preliminary design that I just talked about, but you really can't move forward until the roof is on and shingled and the electricity is in, the main service panel is in, the electricity is on, and then the solar company can come in and measure the roof and know exactly what they can fit, and they can measure the shade as well. And at that point, they can give you an exact number for what that roof can produce annually. You can make a final decision about the size of the system and go forward from there. And if you signed up with the solar company previous to this, knowing that measure is going to come, they can get a lot of paperwork ready, et cetera, et cetera. And then as soon as they measure it, you can finalize things and you can move forward pretty quickly. And then you can have that project move a lot quicker than if you wait to start the whole process until after the whole house is finished, which, is another option. Some people like to build the house and wait a whole year to put the solar on because they want to have a year's usage history. And in some cases, that's a wise decision. But in many cases, it's not, because in many cases, we're just going to max that roof out anyway. So you could have done that, to begin with. So I find that these are the steps that I go through with new homeowners to try and figure out the most efficient system for them and the best way to get it on as fast as possible, because the longer you pay the utility, the more money you lose, and you just spent all this money on a new house. You might want to, have it be as efficient as possible right from the get-go. And then the other thing to consider is the type of roof you're putting on. So asphalt shingle is great for solar. There's really nothing special you need to do to prepare, except for the internal conduit that I was talking about. And then many people these days are going with metal roofs. So standing seam is excellent for solar, but it can actually be beneficial to have the solar guys know when the metal roof is going on, depending on the installation company and what they want. But they may want on a standing seam metal roof to be able to be there right at the time they're putting it in, because they can help do the roof, because there's only going to need to be one roof penetration probably on a standing seam roof, because it can clip on, so you don't have to penetrate, but you do need to get the wiring through, and coordinating that with the roofing company can make it neater and cleaner and more beneficial, and allow you to not have to run conduit, outside over the edge of the eaves and at the edge of the roof. So that can be helpful. And then in my experience, if you're going to do metal shingles, that's a lot more difficult. Metal shingles are fantastic. They look wonderful, but those are really hard to do with solar. And generally the solar company has to coordinate with the manufacturer and installer of those metal shingles, and it can get a lot more expensive. It's possible, but it's just a lot trickier. So I would definitely investigate that before you make that final roofing/solar decision. So those are my helpful hints for going solar on new construction. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Please check out some of my other videos on solar if you have more questions. If you're sick of not knowing what you're going to pay for your electric bill every month, and just being at the mercy of your utility whose prices just keep going up and up and up, maybe I can help. I'm Brad the Solar Guy. Fill out the survey below, and I'll give you a 30-minute free consultation and tell you all about your home's solar potential and what you might be able to save. I'll give you a proposal in writing, and the best part, it's with me, Brad the Solar Guy.